Good morning, my friends. I'm Pastor Ben Hayes from First Baptist Church, Dadeville, Alabama, bringing you our thought for the day on this terrifically cold Tuesday. As I am sitting here right now, it is 19 degrees in Dadeville, Alabama. It is cold outside, but it's warm in here, and I'm going to share with you the Word of God, and that ought to warm your heart just a little bit. So join me right now. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Let's go back to verse 6. Remember what Paul is doing. He says, "Now these things became our examples." He's talking about those Old Testament stories about Moses and the people of Israel. He says, the reason there are examples is to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. You remember the children of Israel, God brought them out of Egypt. He delivered them, He provided for them, and they always wanted more. And then when Moses went up the mountain to get the Ten Commandments, you remember what happened? Well, listen to this. He says, Paul's saying to us, "And do not become idolaters, as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." Here's what they did. Moses goes up on the mountain. He's there for 40 days. They don't know what's happened to him. All they see is the thunder, the lightning, the presence of God. They think, oh, he's died. He's dead. We're here in the wilderness, no leader. Aaron, why don't you build us a couple of golden calves so that we can worship? Now, understand that God of creation had brought them out of Egypt, had taken care of them, and all they wanted to do was to worship idols. Now, understandably, all of their lives had been lived in Egypt. They had been surrounded by pagan worship rituals. They had seen the Egyptians who they assumed were blessed because they were prosperous and they were their masters. And so instead of saying, look, we want to worship the God who brought us out, we want to go back to our old habits. And that was the problem with the children of Israel over and over again. They said, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could go back into that captivity? Because we always had pots of meat to eat. We had leeks and onions, plenty of food to eat, yet their babies were being drowned in the Nile River. They were being beaten and forced to work until they dropped. But isn't that the way it is? We tend to remember things differently. The good old days, right? Well, listen to what he says. Verse 8, Paul's continuing this for us. All of these are examples for us. He says, "Nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And in one day, 23,000 fell." One of the things that God has always been so adamant about is sexual purity among His people. From the very beginning, it was one man and one woman, that faithful, committed relationship for a lifetime. He says all the way back in Genesis that for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one. That is an eternity that he's talking about there. And yet constantly the enemy understood that the best way to tempt God's people to walk away from their faithfulness, their commitment to Him, was through sexual sin. If you remember when Balak hired Balaam, the prophet, to curse the people of Israel, God took Balaam up, he saw the people, and all he could do was bless them. Well, afterwards, he told Balak, he said, look, if you want to get these people, send in your women, your prostitutes. They will lure them away and they will bring them into sexual sin, and God will punish them. And that's exactly what happened. Paul says, don't let us become that way. Let us stay focused on God, nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by serpents. You remember, they thought they were all that in a bag of chips. They were going to do it on their own and constantly rebelling against God. And so he sends in the serpents as a punishment, as a judgment that would bite them, and they would swell up and die. And that was what they did. They were destroyed by serpents until God told Moses to raise the bronze serpent. They would look at that and be healed. A picture of looking to Christ on the cross. Nor complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. Ooh, now this one comes a little bit closer to home for all of us, because most of us, we would say, hey, I'm pretty good. I'm not tempted by sexual sin. I'm focused on God. I don't tempt Christ. I don't do those things. I don't worship idols. But when it comes to complaining, check your heart. He says, don't complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. You know what complaining does? It reveals a dissatisfied heart, a discontent heart. It reveals a lack of trust and love for the Father and for those around us. So think about that. All of that's in the Old Testament as examples to us. That's what he says in verse 11. All these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. We need to walk in the wisdom of these words. Be blessed. I'll see you back here tomorrow.